All right, welcome back. We are still in this series, this summer series called Flipside, looking at some of these upside down sayings of Jesus and how things get twisted and turned around sometimes. Last week, we had a little taste of dad jokes. Who used a dad joke this past week? I love looking at these. They're usually answers to questions that teachers ask, that kids put on their papers, and they put them on the internet, which I think are just absolutely hilarious, because kids do see the world differently. Take a look at this first one here. It says, draw a plant cell and identify its most important parts. No windows, iron bars. It's true. It's a plant. Okay. How about this one? It says, describe what is meant by forgetting. I can't remember. Which actually works, right? Okay. Number 3. I like this one. What is your favorite hue, Jackman? Okay. All right. Next one. What ended in 1896? 1895. Again, like super smart, right? How did I think of that? Okay, last one. Here it is. It says, problem, you fell on the playground and scratched your knee. Solution, get up and deal with it. I want to meet that kid. All right, so we get this idea that sometimes things get kind of flipped, right? And it can be disorienting. When things aren't the way you expect them to be, we get disoriented. That's kind of the way it works. Last week I told you about when I was training to be a scuba diver, right? And how we train scuba divers. Is that often or sometimes you can get caught in water that's either just, you can't see the bottom or it's just murky or you're just caught up in this. And you can kind of get turned on your side or upside down and not know which way's up, which can be deadly. You'd be going down instead of when you think you're going up, that kind of stuff. And so what they teach you is to blow bubbles. Like, watch your regulator. Watch where the bubbles go, because the bubbles will always go up. Always. So if you trust where the bubbles go, you'll know which way is up. Well, in the same way, Jesus has these 8 statements. Okay, these 8 statements. We call them the Beatitudes. They're the beginning of a section of the Bible we call the Sermon on the Mount. And in these 8 statements, they're kind of like those bubbles. They show us which way's up. And they can take us from these dark, murky, uncertain, disoriented waters and show us the right way up. And we covered 3 of them so far. We covered, beginning in Matthew 5, verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they'll inherit the earth. And those do seem pretty upside down. Like when we say, blessed are those who mourn, we say, really? It's good to be sad? But we said a couple weeks ago that when you are sad, when you mourn, it's an honest assessment of the way the world is. We're not going to run from it. We're going to deal with the fact that life is hard. We are not going to ignore it or pretend it doesn't exist or try to fix it, but we're going to mourn. And that's good, and that's okay. And in fact, we know that God mourns with us. That we have a God who cares about us so much that he not only mourns with us, he also comforts us. So blessed are those who mourn, because God's going to comfort them. And then last week we took a look at verse 5. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And meekness, we said, is not weakness. Meekness is not like we think of meekness today. We look back in Jesus' day and said it was more about strength. And it wasn't being timid. It wasn't being milquetoast. It wasn't being a pushover. But it was a quality that was desired by the great leaders. Moses was considered meek. David was considered meek. John the Baptist, Jesus, all considered meek. Because in meekness is humility. And in humility is rooted in this trust in God. In God's power, in God's plan, in God's purpose for our lives. That's what meekness is. And it's something we should desire to be and to live like. So this week we get to the 4th statement, verse 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they'll be filled. Now this one doesn't seem so flipped, does it? Doesn't seem so unusual. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they'll be filled. Until we start looking at what it really means to hunger and thirst. We kind of got to break it down a little bit. So I'd say a lot of us in this room at some point have been hungry. all of us here were probably 17 at some point in our lives when all you were is hungry. You saw my 2 boys last week, right? They're both like 6 foot something. They're hungry all the time. And we have to remind them when they go out to dinner with their girlfriends' families, hey guys, buy 1 meal. Don't get 2 or 3, because they will. They'll come in like, hey, can I get this, this, and this? Because they're hungry. They all want to eat. Or how many of you have ever been hangry? You know what hangry is? Take hungry and angry and you put them together. It's actually a word in the Oxford Dictionary. It says bad-tempered or irritable as a result of hunger. Right? Hangry. It's the kind of thing when you miss breakfast. Okay, you've eaten dinner the night before, you miss breakfast, you drive to work, you get to work, and you're starving. So by noon, you want to go to eat. So go to your friend out there, say, hey man, you want to go get some lunch? Yeah, give me 5 minutes. Okay. 30 minutes later, you go, it's been 5 minutes, ready to go? I need 5 more minutes to finish this email. What do you get? You get hangry at that point. Right? That's what's going on here, is you're getting angry. And you get to the restaurant, and what do? You eat Peking duck like this dude. Check this out. Like, why bother even putting it together, right? Just, whoop, there you go. Whoop. All right. That dude was hungry. Now, is that the kind of hungry that Jesus is talking about here? No, right? He's not talking about this kind of hunger, the kind when you skip lunch or when you're hangry. He's talking about, in his day, for these folks who heard this, hunger was like a real thing, like a serious thing. It's when you haven't eaten in days, and you have no clear idea of where your next meal is going to come from. It's the kind of hungry that your life hangs in the balance if you don't find something to eat. That's hunger. And the same thing with thirst. It's not just, I need a glass of water on a hot day in Arizona. It's the kind of thirst when you wonder when you'll get the next drink. Lips are parched, tongue is swollen, throat is dry, skin is leathery. That kind of thirst. That's what those folks heard when they heard Jesus say this. You don't know when your next meal, when your next drink is going to come from. And then Jesus says, blessed are you when you are starving, when you are thirsty. Now, if you went to a person who was starving and thirsty like that and said, guess what, you're blessed, I bet they disagree. Because it doesn't feel like you're blessed when you're hungry like that or when you're thirsty like that. And when folks are in that situation, when they're that hungry and that thirsty, they will do some crazy things because that hunger and that starving thirst just kind of consumes them. It's all they can think about because it's their life that hangs in the balance. One of the mission fields we serve at, most of you know this, is Northwest Haiti Christian Mission. Been going there for a number of years now to do medical trips, take care of orphans, paint water towers, that kind of stuff. Well, not too long ago, the National Geographic did an article about Haiti. Now, the mission we go to, Northwest Haiti Christian Mission, is in the northern part of the country, in the poorest area of the poorest country in the world. And so those folks who live there know what hunger's like, this kind of hunger. And so when they did this article by National Geographic, what they found out was that sometimes they get so hungry, and their kids would be so hungry, that they make these things they called bonbon thé, which were basically dirt cookies. They took dirt and water, a little bit of oil, and some salt, mixed it together into like mud pies, basically, laid them on the roof, and made these dirt cookies. And they fed them to their kids. Just have something in their stomach to just hold off those dirt pangs. Just to hold off. And now, are these good for you? No. These are bad for you, right? These are going to hurt you. But they kept them from being hungry. A reporter said they tried one, and he said that at first it's kind of soft and creamy, but then immediately it makes you thirsty, immediately. You need that taste of dirt in your mouth, and it lingers. People do crazy things when they're hungry. Or thirsty. You've heard of the stories of sailors who, when they're out at sea, will run out of fresh water. And what do? They look around and say, oh, there's all this water all around them. And their undisciplined thirst takes over, and they drink that water. And it makes it worse. I mean, for a second, it quenches their thirst, but then after that, it makes it worse. They'll die even more quickly from thirst because they drink the salt water. It can make us desperate. And that's the kind of hunger and thirst Jesus is talking about here when he says, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So the next step is to ask this question. What are we to be that hungry and that thirsty for? Okay, we're talking about how hungry and how thirsty Jesus is talking about, but for what? And he's not talking about be hungry and thirsty for, a big slice of Chicago-style pizza and an iced tea. He says, hunger and thirst for righteousness. Now, what does that mean? So last week, if you remember, we looked at the word meekness, and we kind of unpacked it. And we said that the word meekness is not what it means to us as what it meant to those in Jesus' day. It was very different definitions and helped clarify what Jesus was saying. Well, the same is true here. This word righteousness is a big, huge, deep, thick word in the Bible. There's a lot of layers of meaning. And they can even come down to several different ways of looking at this. We're going to unpack it. The Greek word for righteousness is this word here, dikaiousene, this one here. And it has this, again, deep meaning. And the first thing it can mean is it's a personal thing. It's you doing the right thing for the right reason, making things right in your life. So it's you. It's you doing the right thing. In Isaiah chapter 1, it says, learn to do good. Same word, what is right. Seek justice. Rescue the oppressed. Defend the orphan. Plead for the widow. So it's about doing the right thing. Now, how do you know what that is? Well, God defines what the right thing is. It says in the Bible that God is righteous. God does the right thing. So again, in 1 John 2, it says, if you know that He, God, is righteous, you may be sure that everyone who does right has been born of Him. So God does what is right, and you do what God does, you'll be right. So there's a sense that we need to figure out what it is and be hunger and thirsting for doing the right things in our lives. Another definition of righteousness is a relationship. Our relationship with God. Earlier, Kim said we have to kind of focus on what God has given to us. Well, that's what this righteousness is. Something God has given to us. In 2 Corinthians 5, it says, for our sakes, He made Jesus to be sin who knew no sin, so that in Him we might become the righteousness of God. It's our relationship. So God gives us righteousness, a right relationship, makes our relationship with God right, sets it right because of what Jesus did. So it's a gift from God, and righteousness is also an action that we do. It's both. And the third kind of big definition of righteousness is making things right in the world. We look at our world around us, we see a lot of broken stuff. And so righteousness is kind of this global idea of setting things right in the world. In Isaiah 32, it said, then justice will dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness abide in the fruitful field. The effects of righteousness will be peace, and the result of righteousness, quietness and trust forever. We look for a time when God will establish righteousness, which is making things right in our lives, our relationship with God, and in the world around us. So it's all of that. So Jesus says, blessed are you when you hunger and thirst for things to be set right. For things to be set right in your life, in your relationship with God, in the world. And then you'll be filled. So the question today really is this. Are you hungry for that? I mean, really hungry, starving for that in your life. Maybe for you, it's a personal thing today. Maybe you need to set things right in your life today. And you wonder, well, where do I start? Like, what does that even look like? In the Old Testament, people came to a prophet named Micah. And they said, how do we make it right? Like, how do we set things right in our lives? Do we sacrifice to God? Does that make it right? Do we give God 1,000 bulls or 10,000 gallons of oil? Do we do these things to make things right? And Micah answered in this kind of famous text, Micah 6:8. He has told you, O mortal, what is good. what is right. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, which is the word for righteousness. So to be righteous, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. And that word there, by the way, is, which word do you think? Meekness. To do what is right, to love kindness, be meek, are the things that God requires of you. He says, do these things. Don't worry about the sacrificial stuff. Do these things. Do what you know. You can start here. So get these things right in your life. Or maybe you're sitting here today and you think, I need to make my relationship with God right. Like I've been kind of putting God off at an arm's distance for a long time, and I need to make that right. I've been distracted by other stuff. I've put God in the back burner, just kind of not dealt with it. Maybe I need to deal with that. Well, Jesus talks about that too. In Matthew 6, he says, do not worry saying, what will we eat? Or what will we drink? Or what will we wear? For it is the Gentiles who strive after all these things. And indeed, your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But strive first for the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And all these things will be given to you as well. So putting that first. It's a decision you just got to make. I mean, there's no easy way around that one. You got to choose. I'm going to put some things aside to make this relationship first in my life. And it starts there. Seek first. Strive first for the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Everything else come after that. Or maybe you're the person who says, I see the world around me and I want to make things right in the world. I want to set things right. And that's the kind of thing, that kind of hunger that drives us to do stuff like leave home and go to Haiti for a week or two. To help with surgeries, to hold children, to take care of special needs kids, to paint a water tower, or encourages us or drives us to maybe get involved in Family Promise, or go to Syria and help with the refugees. Whatever it is, we get involved in the world around us. That kind of hunger drives us to take care of the world. What sets you right in your relationship with God, in your life, and in the world. Too often, however, we settle, though. Like, instead of really hungering. And Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst to set things right in their life, in their relationship with God, in the world. But we often, too often, appease that hunger with stuff that isn't really food. Right? We would go out and we make ourselves these little bonbon-tay cookies, these little dirt cookies. We eat these dirt cookies, and it puts off the hunger to make things right. And again, that's not a new problem. Isaiah 55 says, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And if you have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. And then God says this, why do you spend money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me and listen so that you may live. And God is saying to the people, why do you keep wasting your time and your effort on stuff that won't satisfy you? I mean, it does for a little bit, like those dirt cookies, it will for a little bit, but it won't really satisfy that hunger. Jesus says, blessed are you when you hunger and you thirst and you are starving to set things right. And yet we're over there munching on dirt cookies, drinking salt water. They're not going to satisfy. And God says, why? So here's the question I have for you today. It's kind of a weird question. What is keeping you from being hungry and thirsty? It sounds like really weird, like, what? But Jesus says, blessed are you when you're hungry and thirsty. So what is it that is keeping you from being hungry and thirsty? What kind of dirt cookies are you eating? Is it video gaming on a computer? Binge watching TV? Maybe some hobby that's just consuming you, or work. Maybe work is just overwhelming. You're just kind of focused on that. Everything else gets kind of pushed to the side. Or maybe your cell phone, social media. There's a ton of things. There's a lot of different flavored dirt cookies out there. But none of them satisfy. Jesus talked about this too. In Matthew 5, just after the Beatitudes, he says this, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go to hell. Let me ask you a question. What do you really mean by that? Did Jesus say really that we should go plucking out our eyeballs or cutting off our hands? And people have asked that question. I asked that question. Like, he can't really mean that, right? Because if he meant that if our eyes and hands cause us to sin, we'd be walking around blind and with our shoelaces untied. I mean, what does he mean by this? Well, first off, does your eye really cause you to sin? No. Does your hand cause you to sin? Not at all, right? It's you make your hands do stuff. You make your eyes do stuff. So I think what Jesus is asking here is, are you going to get hungry enough? Are you going to get thirsty enough to set things right, to find out what really is causing you to sin? Right? Will you get hungry enough and thirsty enough to really find out what in your life, in your heart, in your mind is causing you to sin? Find that and cut that out, is what he's saying. Only you can answer that for you. Again, there's a lot of different flavored dirt cookies out there that we munch on while we're starving the entire time. We need to be starving to set things right. Well, here's the thing. I don't know if you know this, but there's actually a happy ending in many ways to this dirt cookie story in Haiti. So one of the ministries we do support, that we're actually going to on July 11th, is Feed My Starving Children. And so what they do is they pack food. You get together and you help pay for the food, then you pack the food and it gets shipped all over the world, and one of the places it goes to is Haiti. When Feed My Starving Children found out about these dirt cookies, what they did was pretty cool. They went and they got some of the dirt and some of the mud, and they made these mugs out of the same mud, these coffee mugs, to sell, to raise funds for the people of Haiti. So what in your life can you do to be hungry enough to make a difference in your world, to help set things right? Are we letting ourselves, are we driving ourselves to be hungry enough and thirsty enough to set things right in our lives, our relationship with God, in the world? Because when we do, when we get that hungry and that thirsty, it says right here, we will be filled. And Jesus, by the way, didn't just say these words. He lived them. He did. Because he was so hungry and so thirsty for you and our relationship and for the world to be set right, he gave his life for it. He took his own body and said, "This is my body, broken, given for you, so you can be filled." He turned his body into bread for us, his blood into a cup for us, a meal to remind us that there's only one thing that we're to be hungry and thirsty for. And it's for things to be set right with him. And he gave his life for it. So here in a moment, we're going to share communion. We're going to share his body and his blood. His body, which was broken to make us whole. And his blood, which was shed to restore us to relationship with him, to set things right. Let's pray together.